The second condition of the prayer is to cover the private parts. So the prayer is a meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when we meet an important person in our usual habits, usually we try to wear the best that we can. So the most important meeting should be the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and hence we should really prepare for it and cover our private parts. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to do so in Surah Al-A'raf in verse number 31. Ya bani Adam khudhu zinatakum inda kulli masjid. O son of Adams, take your beauty, beautify yourself, ornament yourself, make yourself as beautiful as possible at the time of the prayer in the kulli masjidin. So that beautification's minimum requirement is to cover the private part, and then it extends to each person's ability, his ability to beautify himself with the best dress that he can. But the minimum requirements is to cover the private part. And the private part for the males are usually from the navi button, the belly button, until the knees. This has to be covered. But of course, it should include the upper part of the body with the best of your dress that you can afford, and also it should extend to the half of the knee, but not below the ankles, as we know from the various ahadith. As for the woman, of course, she has to cover all her body parts when she is in front of non-mahram. But if she is alone in her home and she wants to pray, still she has to cover her hair, but can expose her face and the palms and the hand till the wrist. But also she has to wear the best of her dress and a decent way, covering all part of the body except, as I said, the face. But her hair should be fully covered. So this is the practice of the first practice, or the second condition, I mean, for the salah. The third condition that one has to fulfill is to stay away from filthy things, from najasa, from impure things. And impurity can be on the body of the musalli, or it could be in his clothes, or it could be in the place where he is performing the prayer. And we'll see examples of all this type. And one of the clear kinds of najasa, impurity in Islam, are, for example, the urine. Urine is an impure. Blood is impure. Dead body is impure. Wine is impure. The alcohol and wine is impure. The defecations, what comes from person, like the urine or the stool, these are all examples of impurity in Islam. Also, the blood that comes during the menstruation or after the childbirth, these are all impure. The Prophet ﷺ also, for example, asks the person to rub off any kind of impurity from the shoes before praying on them. It's allowed to pray while wearing shoes, but one has to ensure that it doesn't have any kind of impurity. He ordered to rub them. Also, there was an incident when a Bedouin came and urinated in the masjid. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered for water to be poured in order to purify that place. So all these evidences shows us that Islam maintains this cleanliness and prohibits the person to pray in a place where that condition is not fulfilled, which is the condition of being pure, whether in body or the cloth or the place. So if a person knows that he is either carrying one of those things that are impure, or there is some of this impurity in the place or the body or the cloth, he has to get rid of it before starting the prayer. Now let us discuss some of the things that happens out of forgetfulness. Like you have an impurity in your body, like there is a urine, for example, but you forgot about it and remember it after the prayer that you had an impurity. In such a case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive and the prayer is accepted. No issue in that. What if he remembers it while he is prayer? So let's say he's praying dhuhr and there are 2 rak'at done, and then he remembered that, oh, I have an impurity in my, I don't know, underpants or part of the body. So what would we do? Now, if it is possible to get rid of that impurity while performing the salah without doing so much activity, and it is possible to remove it, like a person wearing a cap and that cap has an impurity, he can immediately remove the cap and throw it away and continue the normal prayer without engaging in lots of activities. So let him do that. If he is not able, then he cannot continue the prayer. He has to discontinue the prayer and resume the prayer. Okay, so if it happens in the middle, he can continue. The first 2 rak'ah where he has carried that impurity, Allah will forgive, because he was not intending that. He was forgiving. He has forgotten that. Some of the other places that we need to just note is the graveyard. Graveyard is a place where it is prohibited to perform the prayer in it. And the reason is not because of the impurity. Grave is not an impure, but, and this is the beauty of Islam, Islam observes so many things. The problem in the prayer of the graveyard is that it might lead to committing shirk. It might lead to worshipping the dead who are laying down in the graveyards. So in order to check this possibility, Islam came and made this haram. Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that all the ground, all the earth is pure, or all the earth is suitable, eligible for prayer, except maqbara and hammam, except graveyards or the places where person exposes, usually close the door and exposes himself, like the bath, taking the bath, or the toilets, and the water, for the water circulation places. So one has to observe these objectives of Islam. Also, observing this objective of the avoiding the shirk, also it is not allowed to make the maqbara, the graveyard. You are not in the graveyard, you are outside, but in the qibla of your place is a graveyard. So one needs to avoid that. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "La tusallu ila al-qubur." One exception is the salatul janaza. It is allowed to perform salatul janaza on a dead person, the salah on a dead person in the qabr, but not a normal salah. You cannot pray in the qabr when there is no janaza. Also, we have talked about the bathrooms. These are the places one needs to avoid praying there, because these are places where the private parts are exposed, so one has to respect the salah. Some of the places is the place where the camels are kept, which we call in Arabic A'tanul Ibil. Okay, because these are places where shaitan is associated with it. So these are places one has to avoid praying, as opposed to the places of sheep or cows, for example. These are okay. One of the things that, although it doesn't invalidate the prayer, but one has to avoid as much as possible the places where there are lots of paintings. Let's say you go to a museum and it's surrounded by paintings of those great people or celebrities or personalities. One needs to avoid as much as possible praying in those places, again observing the concept of the shirk or the veneration in these places. So let us try our best to observe this condition and try to make ourselves as pure as possible in the most important ibadah, where we are about to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all this kind of impurity doesn't fit with the purpose and the nobility and the majesty of this meeting that we are about to do, which is meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fourth condition that has to be fulfilled before starting our prayer is facing the Qibla, which is facing the Kaaba in Mecca. And if a person is very close in a way that he can see the Kaaba, then it is easy. He will just face the Kaaba in that. If he is far away, then he will just have to face the direction, because he cannot directly point there. So a little bit of right and left wouldn't harm in that case if a person is far away. So he would exercise his utmost ability and effort to face the Kaaba. But if there are, after exercising the utmost effort, if there is a mistake, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَحَيْثُمَا كُنْتُمْ فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرًا. Wherever you are, face this Kaaba. Face this Kaaba, as in verse number 144 of Suratul Baqarah. Of course, if a person is unable to face the Kaaba, let's say he was a prisoner and the enemy has tied him in a pillar and he is not facing the Kaaba, of course he won't be able to release himself. So and similarly, if there are any other valid reasons, then this condition is not applicable to him. How should we know the Qibla? Of course, if a person is there in Mecca, he can know it. Otherwise, he can seek the assistance of other people. If a trustworthy person told him that this is the Qibla, then that is one of the legitimate way of knowing the Qibla. Also, looking into the masjid. Usually the masjids are designed in such a way that you can know that the Qibla is in that direction. Also looking into the stars. Those who knows about the stars and their positions, they can use the stars. Nowadays you can use all the apps and tools that are there. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. The fifth condition of prayer is a niyyah, which is the intention. So one needs to know in his heart that he is now praying. So the praying is not a yoga or any other activity. So you distinguish between a normal work and a work of worship by niyyah. Also, the niyyah is important to know that what are you doing? Are you praying nafil? Are you praying dhuhr? Are you praying asr? So you cannot be just absent-minded there. So that's the very essence of niyyah, that in your heart you know what I am doing. You're just not mechanically doing something without an intention. So that is the niyyah. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the famous hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, all the actions are not able to done except with a niyyah, and the actions are validated or invalidated based on the true niyyah. And one of the true niyyah we do is that we don't do it except for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sincerity also comes here. And if we know this, we know that saying something or utterance is not part of niyyah. The niyyah's place is in the heart. You don't have to memorize some dua that I have to say this dua to declare my niyyah. Then your niyyah is in between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a mindfulness in your heart. And that is enough. No need to associate that with any type of utterance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. One of the most important conditions of prayer is to be on the purity, on the pure form, and that is fulfilled through making wudu. And wudu is a big chapter which we are not covering here in detail, but this is one of the essential parts of prayer. A precondition for the prayer is that you have to be on the state of wudu. And a person, let's say even after the prayer he forgot and he just remembered that I was not performing wudu, then he has to repeat the prayer. So this is a condition of prayer. It is as opposed to the najasa, the impurity that one is required to be sure that he is not impure. We have said already that if a person after prayer remembers that he has some impurity in his body or clothes, then his prayer is okay. He is not required to repeat it. But for wudu, no. If you remember that you are not in wudu, you just have to repeat the prayer, because you haven't satisfied that condition, which is the wudu. And of course we know that if a person he didn't find water for wudu, then there is the other condition, or there is the other alternative, which is the tayammum, using the dust or the soil to make the wudu. And also we know in certain cases that you need to go for ghusl if you are in a state of impurity that cannot be removed except through the washing the body. Okay, so these are also conditions that inshallah we might find some other times or other opportunity to describe them in detail, but I wanted to make it known here is that wudu is one of the important conditions for prayer.